Hey, hello everybody, it's Ultran here, and we're back to making tunes again. Today I'm going to rank some of the abnormality pages of Library of Ruina, namely the pages of the SI floors, or the lower floors as you might call them. So everything until this page will be ranked today because there are far too many pages to rank in one video because that would take a lot of time. I might get some of those pages wrong, and I might forget many of those pages names, but I'm pretty sure I can make everything alright. So once again we have the tiers object dart, limited, hardcover, paperback and burnt, and these are the tiers that we are going to put all of this in. Starting with this page. As far as I know, it is called a token of friendship, and I really have to pull up the Wikipedia to see what it does. So what token of friendship does is basically it recovers 10% of HP of every librarian on the field and every scene for 3 scenes. Basically it recovers you 30% of your HP, and that's just a great bonus. It is a tier 2 awakening page, and I feel like for Netzach's floor there aren't many really great tier 2 pages except for this. A token of friendship is probably one of the easiest pages to just take and have a lot of usage out of it. Now Predation is kind of the opposite. Well, not really the opposite, but all librarians lose 10% HP, outside of one librarian that you've selected. That librarian recovers as much HP as the amount lost from this effect and gains 3 strength and haste this scene, meaning that you can make one of your librarians really strong at the cost of the HP of all the others. But it has only a 1 scene bonus of strength and haste, but it does recover a lot of HP for your main librarian. So if you're running a solo build on Melko's floor, you might want to use Predation, especially knowing that many people like to use Eugen there. I'd put Predation somewhere in the hardcover tier, as I haven't gotten much usage out of it myself, and I feel like there are better pages on Melko's floor. Now for Rhythm. Rhythm is a pretty interesting page, because I've used it a lot. What Rhythm basically does is, for the duration of the battle, the librarian gains 1 rhythm at the start of the scene. Whenever the character makes a successful attack, a random character gains 1 rhythm at a 20% chance next scene. And rhythm gives you 1 strength, and you take additional damage from stagger damage from attacks. Really, that 1 strength is pretty nice, but the stagger damage can actually lead you to kill your librarians really quickly. So if you have someone who is already a strong clasher, you might want to give rhythm to them. If you don't and you play around actual teamwork, you might want to avoid this page. I put it in high paperback tier because it has the ability to kill your people, but it also gives somewhat of a nice bonus. Okay, this is a page of their fractions, I really don't know how to pronounce that name. It is called Dark Flame, it is a tier 3 page. At the start of the scene, gain strength and protection proportional to the number of dead allies. And if the librarian did not deal any damage with attacks by the end of the scene, take 3 to 6 stagger damage. So basically it is a much more forgiving version of the Red Mist, but it is a tier 3 abnormality page. It's pretty nice if you're once again running a solo build, but I don't think that Yesod's floor is the best floor to run solo builds on. There are much better floors than Yesod's floor for that, but still, if you're in the middle of a tough fight and many of your librarians are already dead, you might want to use Dark Flame on your strongest clasher. So with that said, I probably put Dark Flame in hardcover tier. It doesn't do any harm to your allies, but it also isn't incredible. Now for request. Add a request page to the hand. Cost 1, mass attack individual. Roll range 7 to 11, targets all characters, exhaust and hit. And use, I mean. And hit inflict to fragile next scene. This is pretty interesting. It is a tier 3 page, and it is a mass attack page that targets all characters, so it targets both enemies and allies. Once again, this goes into the category of if you're running a solo build, this is great, but it also exists on use, meaning that it isn't as strong in solo builds as something like Blind Rage from different flaws, so it is still a pretty bad choice. We put it in high paperback because it does kill your allies, and really it is much worse than something like Dark Flame. Okay. So, this page. It's called Nostalgic Embrace of the Old Days. Nope, it's not the one. It's called Happy Memories. Choose a page with the highest cost in hand. Using pages with the same name will decrease the cost of all copies of the page the character currently owns by 1. This page is definitely object.tier just because you can run Fusion with clone on Malchus floor, and this page will just drop down the cost of bunch of deaths that will be cloned to 0 really quickly. And really, without many cool strategies, it is still a pretty strong page because it gives you the ability to drop down the cost of your most expensive page, and if you're running a build that is that uses heavily some high cost pages, like pages with 4 cost, you might want to run Happy Memories because it is pretty much a nice buff to that strategies. Now Metallic Ringing. I don't even have to pull up the Wikipedia for this one because it is just a great page. It is once again going the object.tier, probably even over Happy Memories, maybe not. So what this page essentially does is upon a successful blunt attack, inflict 1 bind and paralysis. With the Abnormality page, I mean Ego page, Solemn Lament, this can inflict lots of paralysis and bind, meaning you'll have complete control over your enemies, and against some boss fights it can be incredibly good. So I definitely recommend you using Metallic Ringing over many other pages on Nexus floor. Mage Light. Okay, Mage Light is a pretty weird page. The first 2 combat pages the librarian uses after the Abnormality page is selected gain the Mage Light status. When a librarian uses a page with Mage Light, gain 1 Ember. Pages with Mage Light become stronger based on the amount of Ember. However, they have a 25% chance to damage the user if Ember is at 4 or higher. So it is great for short fights, so it is pretty nice at the start of the game. But even at the start of the game I haven't used it much because it seems pretty weird, once again. Ember makes your pages stronger, but you also can take damage from your own pages, meaning that it can deal damage to your allies, and that means that it cannot go over paperback in my opinion. So yeah, that's here. No, I actually think I should be too harsh in this. Mage Light is probably low hardcover tier. Obsession. Okay, Obsession is the page that basically makes HOTS for a great flaw. It doubles the amount of stacks all characters on the field apply. Well, it does mean that your enemies also apply twice as much bleed. You won't see as many enemies inflicting lots of bleed. So, running it with Sales page or later in the game Purple Tears page, it is pretty strong and can definitely break some fights. So, that said, probably going into object that page over anything else we have. Pebble. Okay, this is a page that I have to put Wikipedia on once again. Pebble, at the start of each scene, 3 random pages gain the Pebble status, recover 3 to 7 HP upon using pages with Pebble, lose 1 to 3 HP upon using pages without the Pebble. So basically you'll be dealing damage to yourself with all of the pages, but you'll be recovering much more HP with the Pebble pages. It's pretty nice if you can reroll your entire hand quickly, but if you cannot, that might be a giant problem for you, as if you use a page in hand that you cannot get quickly, you'll just lose much more HP than you regain by using it. So I would definitely put it in high paperback because it can help, but you have to have a great hand. That said, with something like singleton builds, it can be pretty easy to use Pebble because singleton builds are really strong when we're talking about getting pages and light, because they never run out of it. Loving Family. Loving Family is a tier 3 page on Hot Floor, and on use a single ally gains 6 Nettle Clothing, which gains protection equal to its amount each scene. A stack of Nettle Clothing is lost at the end of each scene. Is that how it works? I'm pretty sure they changed it. But I'll still be ranking the ones that I've just read on Wikipedia because I believe it. So, it's a pretty nice protection buff for a couple scenes, but for tier 3 it's not that great, though if you want to preserve a librarian that is almost dead at the end of the fight, you might want to go for Loving Family, even though both other tier 3 pages on Hot's Floor are much better. So I'd put Loving Family at high paperback once again. It doesn't kill you, but it is definitely not a great page, considering you have much better pages. Loyalty. That is the first tier 3 page of Melchior's Floor, and it's actually one of the only pages that one of the only tier 3 pages that don't require you to get a 5th Abnormality. At the start of the scene, all allies gain strength based on the amount of damage the librarian took in the previous scene, 1 strength per 8 damage. We have a very similar page at Gibor's Floor, but it works when the librarian themselves take damage, and it is 1 strength per 5 damage. So it is a pretty nice page. For tier 3, you probably cannot afford to take a lot of damage, and knowing that it only gives you 1 strength per 8 damage, you won't be stacking more than 2 strengths each scene, unless you are purposefully letting the librarian die, which you probably shouldn't do. So it is kind of a buff, but also if you take less than 8 damage each scene, you'll still be dying, but nobody will get strength from that. So that's also high paperback for me. No, actually let's put it in low hardcover, just over match left, because it does not kill the team, but it also isn't that strong. Incomprehensible. What Comprehensible does is... 1 second. Holy shit, how big is this page? Incomprehensible, and one-sided attack inflicts 1 feeble and disarm to the target at a 40% chance. So, even though it is a breakdown page, it just gives you positive things. You can inflict 1 feeble and disarm to the target at a 40% chance when using a one-sided attack. It is very strong, and the likelihood increases for 10% for every successful attack, so it is even stronger when you are using a lot of attacks at once. Very good on boss fights, but I'm pretty sure that when clashing with counter dice, it is still counted as a clash and not a one-sided attack, meaning that it won't proc when clashing with counter dice, which makes it a bit worse. But knowing that you can get it very early in the game, you can get a lot of usage out of it, so I'd put it in high limited, mostly because I haven't used it that much. It maybe is object dart, but yeah, it probably is object dart, knowing that I don't know how to play Netzach's Floor. Oh, Coffin. Page choice Coffin, and that page is just incredible. Coffin has... nope, it's not Coffin. I'm talking out of my ass, it is Lament. Deal 2 to 7 stagger damage against an enemy whose stagger resist is at 25% or lower. That page is pretty nice. It isn't as great as other tier 2 pages on Yesod's Floor, but you can definitely get some usage out of it. If you want to quickly stagger an enemy who is already close to being staggered, you can do that with Lament really easily. So I would say Lament is kind of limited, because it doesn't deal any damage to your allies, and it is overall just a positive buff and very helpful when you want to stagger an enemy. Now, Flower Petals. Every time the Librarian sustains damage greater than 10% of their max HP, all allies recover 3 to 9 stagger resistance. It's pretty nice that it isn't bound to scenes, and it is a tier 2 page. Mostly pages that have the Librarian take damage are tier 3 pages, meaning that you won't get too much usage out of them. So Flower Petals is definitely not a bad page, and it doesn't make your Librarian take 10% of their max HP as damage. It actually procs every time they do. So basically, in best case scenario, you can proc it 10 times, I guess. And 3 to 9 stagger resistance is pretty nice, so you can definitely get your team to not be staggered for a long time if you clash a lot with a Librarian that has Flower Petals. I'd put it at really high hit cover, because 10% of HP is a lot, and you really have to be killing your own teammates for it to work consistently. Now I'm pretty sure this is called Worker-B, right? Yep, Worker-B. It is a tier 2 breakdown page that is used on single ally. The enemy who dealt the most damage to the selected Librarian is marked. Other allies deal 2 to 4 more damage to the marked foe with attacks. Yeah, there's not much to be said about this. It is a nice page. The fact that this is tier 2 makes it a little bit worse, but when you are fighting against a boss, once again, it is pretty useful. So I would recommend using Worker-B when fighting against something like the Crying Children, because I'd also recommend using Nexus Flow there. So with that said, it's probably limited or hardcover. The impact it gives is not as strong as limited pages usually do, so I'd put it in hardcover just over Predation, as it doesn't kill your allies. Okay, now we're back to Hot's Flow. With the Abnormality page, Shyness. When using a page, all block dice on that page gain power equal to the number of defensive die on the page. This basically means that if you're using a lot of defensive dice, they get buffed because there are a lot of them. Really, it is not that strong, and the main reason to that is that Hot's Flow benefits much more from stacking debuffs than actually using block dice. And there are two ways of using Hot's Flow, that is debuffs and block dice, and the latter one is far worse than the former one in my opinion. So I will put Shyness a bit lower because of that, just because it is outclassed by everything else, like Obsessions that we have this high. So Shyness is definitely not a bad page, but it is definitely outclassed, so I put it on hardcover just over Predation once again, as it doesn't deal any damage to your allies. Okay, Well-Known Parasol. Well-Known Parasol is a pretty interesting page too, and it is much stronger now that the Hot's Flow pages have been updated. Gain 2 to 3 speed, when hit nullifies the damage at a 30% chance and return double the amount to the attacker as stagger damage. That means that you can essentially get a block die without block dice, and the 2 to 3 speed are pretty nice. So once again, the problem is that this page greatly benefits the strategy of using block dice on Hot's Flow, which is worse than stacking debuffs in my opinion. So just because of that, and because this once again outclassed by a different page on Hot's Flow tier 3, I wouldn't put it too high up, but it still deserves a limited spot in my opinion because it is very strong. The Seventh Bullet is a tier 1 page, which is very interesting because it is gotten from a 5th abnormality on Yesod's Flow. The Seventh Bullet, each time the Librarian uses a page, offensive dice deal 1 additional damage up to 7. Every 7th page has a 50% chance to target random characters, including allies. It is pretty weird, as you can stack a lot of damage with it, and when used with smoke it can do a lot, but still, once again, it is outclassed by pages like Metallic Ringen in tier 1, and the 50% chance to target allies with the 7th page is pretty strong, and pretty strong in a bad way. I would put it somewhere in the paperback tier with all of the other outclassed and really deadly to the player pages. It is not that bad, so I would put it probably in high paperback, because once again with smoke it can deal incredible amounts of damage, but without it you're just wasting an Abnormality page. The finale is a tier 3 page on Nexus floor, and whenever the selected rebellion staggers an enemy, all enemies lose 1 to 6 slides at the start of the next scene. Very nice, unless the enemy has shimmering. And that means that it basically is a very strong page until you actually get to Star City Row 3 and above, because many people there have shimmering. So also 1 to 6 light is great, because if you proc the max proc of 6 light or something like 5 or 4 light, it can easily not let the enemy use any strong attacks, so it has a lot of potential, but it also isn't that great because shimmering exists. And also it only works when the Librarian staggers an enemy, meaning that no usage in boss fights, and if the enemy cannot be staggered, it also won't do anything. So the finale is not as strong as it could have been, but it is still pretty useful. I would put it just under Worker B in hardcover tier. Social distancing. I'm pretty sure that this what this page is. Yeah. Block dice gain 1 to power, deal 2 to 7 additional stagger damage on a deflect. It's actually kind of 2 pages on Hawkman's floor merged into one, and it is on Hod's floor, so it's kind of weird because it is much stronger than Hawkman's floor probably could ever be. But once again, there are much better pages on Hod's floor, and I really never even use social distancing because of that. But it is pretty strong. 1 to 2 power plus 2 to 7 additional stagger damage on deflect is very nice if you're running a block dice strategy. You probably not, but if you prefer that, if you for some reason prefer the strategy, it is a great page to go along with that. We'll put it just above Valve on Parasol, because it can be gotten pretty easily, and in tier 1 on Hot's floor there aren't many incredible pages like in tier 3. Now back to Nexus floor and Unreal. Experience Genesis. Each scene a battle is attached to a random character. After the character wins in the battle, if the battle takes 4 hits in a single scene, all characters take 3 to 7 stagger damage and the character becomes untargetable for the next scene. It's pretty nice, I guess. It is very nice as a panic button, because if your librarian takes a lot of damage and is focused, they won't take any more damage next scene, but everyone else will take a lot of stagger damage. Pretty nice for solo, I guess, but also solo Netzach is kind of weird, but you can definitely use it. So Prince Genesis, top hardcover tier. Not incredible, but definitely very useful. Now we are back to Marcus floor, and this time we have fucking this Wikipedia page is so weird. Spores. Upon taking a hit, inflict 1 to 3 bleed and burn to the attacker. Burn stacking, kind of okay-ish. Knowing that there is another Normality page on Marcus floor that inflicts bleed when the librarian is hit, it can be pretty useful, yeah. Sure, not great, but definitely like above match light, I think. Now for small gift. Pretty sure that it is how this page is called. And it is surprise gift. And the first opponent to clash against the selected librarian gains the giftee status. If the giftee clashes against a character other than the librarian that gave the gift explodes with a 40% chance, dealing 2 to 7 damage at the start of this clash and inflicting 2 bleed next scene. When the giftee dies, a new gift can be given. This is pretty nice, because once again it stacks bleed, which is great. It deals damage, and really if you are fighting a boss like Greta, for example, this page is just great for that fight, because the boss will be clashing with basically everyone, so having the giftee status on them will be great. Not paperback, probably high hit cover, just under the 2 Elrion's pages. Wines. Right? Is that the name? Nope, it is Wines. For the rest of the action, inflict 6 bind to a random enemy at the start of the scene. Pierce dice, gain 1 to 2 power when attacking that enemy. It is a great page. It is also a tier 2, which is pretty unexpected for such a strong ability. A lot of bind and Pierce power up. Really, if you're running some kind of Oscar build, no, you're not going to run that, because binds are obtained much later in the game than that, but still, if you're running some kind of Pierce build, you might want to take Vines. Also, 6 bind is just insane. So that's definitely pretty high. Here, let's put it in limited, just under everything else. We really don't have any burnt pages right now, because they all are alright. Nothing really kills you too much. But now we have Teardrop. With this, all characters take 25% of this character's max HP as damage, maximum 30. Pretty nice. Actually, I think it is very good when you're playing solo. If you're not, why the fuck would you even take that? Really, it doesn't give you anything, it is a tier 2. When I say it doesn't give you anything, I mean... Wait, why did they even say that this is good on solo? You're required to die there, that's definitely burnt. Now we actually have a burnt page. What am I even thinking? You really cannot get any usage of it. I mean, the only usage I can think of is actually last librarian dying when the enemy has low HP and just killing the enemy and themselves and you win the fight that way. But it's still a very dumb page, why would you pick that and not something like Smith's Genesis? Okay, now back to actually useful pages. Tentacles. On successful pierce attack, reduce the max attack resist of target by 5% up to 50%. Well, that's fucking great, okay? I mean, percentages are pretty nice, especially when there are no max caps. And there is no max cap on this page, so you can just take stagger damage, stagger resistance maximums of bosses easily. So if you can stagger bosses during a fight, you can definitely do that even faster with Tentacles. Life and Powder. Life and Powder is actually a pretty nice page, in my opinion, because upon taking a hit, recover 2 to 4 stagger resistance if the character isn't staggered, meaning that if you take really low damage, you can recover more stagger resistance than you take it in stagger damage. So it is pretty useful. Also, if you take a very strong attack, you can also recover a part of stagger resistance from that attack, making it a bit less impactful on your stagger resistance. So Life and Powder is definitely also limited or hardcover tier. Would probably put it in hardcover tier. It isn't as incredible as the limited pages, but it is still very strong. Now, back to Source Flow and Violence. Upon a successful blunt attack, if the die rolled max value, deal 2 to 5 bonus stagger damage. I mean, it is very unreliable because you have to roll max values on your blunt dice, but if you get lucky enough, it is great. Also, stagger damage is pretty nice with blunt damage. I would put it somewhere in low hardcover tier because it isn't very reliable and it is outshined by other pages of Yesod's tier 1. Now back to Hotsflow and her page Today's Expression. Well, it is kind of a weird Abnormality page. I really don't like this because I am shit at timing the phase, but for uninitiated, your librarian's phase always changes, and the angrier it gets, the more power your dice get on the librarian. And it's great if you can time it. I cannot really be bothered with that, but it can just give you straight up +2 power every scene, which is nice. I'd put it somewhere in high hardcover tier, just because +2 power is incredible, but you also have a chance at getting -2 power, so yeah, somewhere here, just under those Netzach pages. Now back to Malka's floor and her Abnormality page, Fairy Scare. Right? Am I right? Please tell me I'm right. Yep, Fairy Scare. For 3 scenes, recover 50% of max HP at the end of the scene. If the character takes 3 hits while this effect is active, lose 35% of your current HP, maximum 30. And loses effect. So it's kind of weird. It is basically a better version of Token of Friendship, but you can take a lot of damage with it. So if you're careful enough, you can just easily get 45% of max HP back, and with a maximum of 18 you can actually use it on Eugen and get a lot of mileage from that. So it is pretty strong, but in my opinion it is pretty easy to lose clashes on Malka's floor because there aren't many power related Abnormality pages, so I would put it somewhere in hardcover tier once again. As you can see, many of the pages inside floor are just mediocre, with not a lot of them being really strong, not a lot of them being really weak. Okay, what the fuck is this page? This is a Netzach floor page, which is called Thorns. On a successful pierce attack, inflict 1 thrill to the target. Against targets with 5 or more thrill, deal 2 to 7 additional damage and stagger damage and remove all stacks of thrill. I actually never saw that it does additional damage and not just stagger damage, which makes it pretty nice. It is a tier 1 page and it has no downsides, meaning that you can just put it on your librarian. I don't think many pages outshine it on Netzach's floor. Only Tentacles really, so Thorns is a pretty nice page. I really haven't used it too much, but 2 to 7 additional damage, stagger damage, basically every 6 pierce attack is pretty nice, yeah, why not? Not incredibly strong, but still pretty useful. Would put it somewhere here, nope, higher than block dice. Back to Malka's floor and her first Abnormality. Now we have Footfalls. Yeah, I've used this page a lot when I started the game, because it's pretty fun. When a librarian's HP is at 20% or lower, deal 30% of the target's max HP as damage, max 36, inflict 3 burn upon approaching them and die. So the only problem with Footfalls is that I greatly overestimated it when I used it, because it deals 30% of the target's HP and not even max HP, so... Wait, no, it does do max HP. Okay. Well, that's better. So, forget what I said, it is pretty nice still. If your librarian is at very low HP, you can just use that and kill yourself and kill the enemy really quickly. It is pretty useful at the start of the game when everyone is very squishy and you can get really low HP pretty quickly. And I think it really loses its power once you get into the mid game, but in the early game it can be pretty useful. Would put it somewhere over Surprise Gift, let's put it over Surprise Gift, because I really like this page. I put it so high just because of my personal bias, because I really like this page. Coffin. Yeah. Finally we get a great page once again. Coffin is an incredible page that can seal a speed die of a target if the target has 50% or less HP. And that's just nice. Sealing speed dice is great, especially against bosses with a lot of speed dice. So there's not much more to say about this, it's just a great page overall. Also it is tier 2, not tier 3, so you can get a lot of usage from it. Back to Hot's flow with Friend. Start the scene, sneak a friend into one of the combat pages in hand. Does not activate when there's already a page with a friend in hand. The page with the friend gains 2 to 4 power, however if the page is not used within 2 scenes, it exhausts, dealing 2 to 7 damage to the librarian. The biggest thing about friend is that it exhausts the page, if you cannot use it. And if it targets your page with a really high cost and you are low on light, say goodbye to that page. That is the only thing that is keeping friend from getting into object tier. We probably put it in limited over social distancing, as 2 to 4 power is incredible, but you are forced to play a page basically. And if it is some very weak page, you might not get a lot of usage from that, and if it is a very costly page, it can also kill you instead of the enemy. And get rid of the page too. And finally we can actually see the pages of the helper. Repetitive pattern recognition feature. Well, that's our name. After dealing damage greater than 15% of the target's max HP with a combat page, restore 1 light and gain 1 to 2 haste next scene. Well, if you use very strong Abnormality pages, ego pages of the librarian, it is very useful. Outside of that, 1 light for 50% of the target's max HP is weak if you're in mid-game or end-game. In the early parts of the game it is pretty useful, and you can in fact inflict a lot of damage on some smaller enemies of your enemies, yeah. So if there are a lot of the enemies and there's like one boss and some of its goons, you can easily deal a lot of damage to them and get haste and light back. With that said, it is kind of outperformed by other tier 1s on this floor, so I would put it somewhere in probably just above Predation, as that it is worse than everything else, but it doesn't kill you. Music. A tier 2 page from also Yesos's floor. All characters deal 1 to 4 additional damage with attacks this act. Characters suffer 1 to 4 additional staggered damage upon taking a hit. It's kind of weird, because it basically means that everybody receives 1 to 4 additional stagger damage and damage with attacks. And if you can manage to not get hit at all, it is great, but it can also lead to you actually taking a lot of stagger damage, because it is used for the entirety of the act. So I would put it on high paperback because it still kills you. Back to Hot's floor with the page. What the fuck is it? Funny prank. Oh right, funny prank. Okay, so it's a very weird page. The first die of any combat page librarian plays will always roll either the maximum or minimum value. Take 2 to 7 damage if it rolls the minimum value. I guess it is very useful with manipulator of odds, and Boundary of Death can actually be kind of broken with this, because you can pretty early make Boundary of Death a 50% 50 damage dealer. So I put it in limited, even though it does kill your allies, but it can give you lots of usage with Boundary of Death. Glitter is actually a very interesting page, because this is tier 1, and at the start of the scene each enemy is alert as a 50% chance. Alert enemies gain 2 to 4 damage for their attacks and prioritize the selected librarian as a target. The librarian gains 1 to 2 power in a clash against an alert enemy. The page got actually buffed, and before I think you just did a lot of damage to them. So they had 2 to 4 additional damage, and I think the librarian had something like 4 to 6, or like 3 to 6. So you did a lot of damage when taking them, but now you actually gain power, and power in my opinion is much better than damage. So I would put it somewhere in the hardcover tier, because once again it does come with a cost of the enemies attacking on the one of your librarians, but that librarian actually gets power against those enemies, so It is pretty strong. We'll put it somewhere here. No, let's actually put it under this expression. Okay, so nice. This page, yeah. Further duration. Named after one of the worst debuffs of the game, all enemies target random characters including their own allies for 2 scenes. Enemies deal 2 to 4 additional damage with attacks while this effect lasts. Well, I mean, yeah, sure. Of course. Haven't used it at all? It seems like an incredible page because on my allies the fervent duration debuff actually just killed my entire team. And when used by enemies, it can do the same. And I say can because it isn't guaranteed. So probably not object that, and I kind of didn't think too much. So let's give it limited, high limited, because it is strong, but 2 to 4 additional damage is also pretty rough if they actually attack your people. But still, if you can outclash them, it is a great page to just kill the enemies with their own attacks. And it works for 2 whole scenes instead of 1, as you would expect. So it is still great after the 1 scene, so giving the enemies 2 scenes probably means that they will go through a certain cycle of their attacks if those are like both enemies. So they will attack each other with really strong attacks. Okay, back to Yesod's flow. Give me a second. The page is called Musical Addiction and offensive dice gain 1 to 3 power. Defensive dice roll 1. Okay. I don't know what to say about this page. It is basically a forced clash loose with any defensive die, but 1 to 3 power for your offensive dice in exchange. If you want to run a completely offensive build on your source floor, it is fine and then can be very useful. But in my opinion, you always have at least a couple of defensive dice that will always roll 1 and first off flood your emotions with negative emotion coins and of course make you take a lot of damage. So that's paperback. Yeah, it is probably one of the best paperbacks here because it definitely gives you a lot of power, but it also kind of kills your allies quickly. Well, allies, I mean the one librarian used them. Nostalgic embrace of the old days. Upon winning the clash, deal stagger damage equal to the dice value at a 20% chance. Clashing against the same target multiple times will increase the likelihood. Well, it's nice. When using really hard hitting punches, you can deal a lot of staggered damage there. And if you're fighting against a boss, once again, the clashing against the same target multiple times will increase the likelihood part of the page will actually be very useful. So that is definitely limited. I'd put it somewhere alongside Tentacles because both of those pages deal additional stagger damage, which is always nice. Okay, this page is either called Gooey Waste or Green Waste, and I don't remember which one. What is it? It is Gooey Waste, okay. Upon winning the clash, inflict 1 bind, fragile, bleed and paralysis to all enemies next scene, twice per scene. It is twice per scene, which is great, and I love that they made it twice per scene instead of once per scene. While there are no disarms and feebles, there is bind, fragile, bleed and paralysis is just great. Really shouldn't go into detail about why paralysis is great, but that only means one thing. Gooey Waste is object dart because it has no downsides and a giant upside of actually inflicting lots of debuffs, and once again, as I said, the best way of using Hot's Flow is debuff stacking. So definitely Gooey Waste goes into object dart, really probably just under coffee. Meal is an interesting page. On a successful attack against a staggered enemy, all allies recover 2 to 4 HP. the biggest thing about this is that all allies recover HP, meaning that it is a pretty strong HP recovery Abnormality page. Only works against target enemies though, so it isn't just broken, but it is pretty nice if you can manage to stagger enemies quickly. So in a fight against many enemies at once, you can focus down one enemy and deal a lot of stagger damage to them, and then with meal you'll keep your entire team alive. But that is very unlikely to happen, so I put it in hardcover with all of the other pages, somewhere above Leader probably, because it doesn't kill the allies, it actually heals them, so it does the absolute opposite of that, and that is really useful. Sadly, it is outperformed by many other pages, so yeah, this is yes. And now back to Nexus Flow with Gluttony. It is a tier 2 awakening page, and when attacking a target who already took damage in the same scene, deal 1 to 3 additional damage and recover 2 to 5 HP on hit. I've used this with Eugene on Nexus Flow and I loved it. Really, Gluttony is great because it not only gives you more offensive capabilities, it actually heals the user. So once again, if you use it on Eugene, and Eugene is a page that is frequently run on Nexus Flow, you can get a lot of usage out of it. So it is probably limited object that I would put it on limited because it is kind of tied to Eugene. Well, not really tied to Eugene, but without Eugene you might want to go for different pages. Laughter. Nope, not Laughter. It has a different name. The exact name is... wow, not even close. Pleasure. Upon taking a hit, receive 2 to 5 bonus stagger damage and install 1 light with a 50% chance. Next we have Charge. Charge is actually a pretty nice page because it also restores 1 light, and instead of actually killing you, every 3 clash wins restore 1 light and gain 1 to haste. I don't know why repetitive part recognition feature even exists, because this is much better. It gives you the exact same thing, but after winning every 3 clashes instead of dealing a lot of damage. And when I first got this page, I actually didn't use it at all, and I really underestimated its value, because I thought it meant when winning clashes with 3 different combat pages. It actually means 3 dice, so you can just easily make a normal clash 3 dice against 3 dice, and if you win all of that, you restore 1 light and get 1 to 2 haste next scene. That's great, that's limited. Undergree Waste. Nope, Undergree Waste, I like it better. This page is Malice. As I've seen, all enemies take damage inversely proportional to the amount of HP the librarian has, minimum 4, maximum 16, less HP and more damage. I don't fucking know how this works. Really. A tier 3 page that has the maximum ability to just deal 16 damage. It says such of the scene in Wikipedia, but I'm pretty sure it means it's the start of this scene in the game. If it is every scene, well, that's just insane. I mean, it would be broken, but I'm pretty sure it only works once, so that it's like it's weak. It's really weak. But it also doesn't kill you, so I put it in hardcover anyways. Another page of the couple. Those tend to be pretty interesting. This one is Every Repeating Performance, and it is probably one of the most interesting pages, as I already said. Add an every repeating performance page to the hand, cost 3, and ends the scene. At the start of the next scene, uses HP and stagger resistance return to the values they had when acquiring this page, and full restore light. This page is also included in the deck at the start of subsequent acts. That's a big word. So, really, it is an interesting page because you can just skip an entire scene with that, and it also fully recovers light. So, when using only repeating performance and nothing else, it kind of just gives you max light. It's in theory I haven't actually used it, but I have a series that you can use a repeating performance in order to tank a lot of attacks with one of the librarians, the one that has a repeating performance, and then you can use it at the end of the scene. It ends the scene, which wouldn't make any difference. It gives you a lot of light and it restores all of your HP and stagger resistance. So it seems to be pretty nice. It is a tier 2 actually, not a tier 3, even though the kappa is the 5th abnormality, so I would put it somewhere here, probably over Lament. No, let's put it under Lament because you have to actually think when using it. And now Cocoon. On a successful attack, if the die rolled maximum value, inflict 1 to 2 paralysis, bind and fragile. Before it was a tier 2, but now it is a tier 1 hot flow page. And it is great, because debuffs. It also benefits from a maximum roll, which I kind of don't like, but it also benefits from all types of damage, so you can just use the page Graze the Grass, that has a 3 to 4 dice roll at the end of it. And if you just use it as a one-sided attack, it basically has a 50% chance to inflict 1 to 2 paralysis, bind and fragile, and paralysis is just great. Bind is alright, and fragile is also pretty nice, so I would put it somewhere in limited tier. Not quite object dot, but very close to that. Somewhere under incomprehensible. Back Technologies flaw, now we have the Abnormality page, Display of Affection. All dice gain 1 to 2 power in a clash, all dice lose 1 to 2 power in a one-sided attack. If you want to make a full-on clash, just use this page. I feel like it is much better than if it was the other way around, so it is useful, definitely. One-sided attacks, yeah, you won't get any use from them, only light recovery I guess. But making a great clasher at really early points of the game is pretty nice, so I would put it somewhere in hardcover tier, really high hardcover tier, somewhere here. Echoes from the Beyond. This is a page that is very useful when you first acquire it, and then it loses its power quickly, because it deals 10 stagger damage to all enemies and recovers 10 stagger resistance of all allies, if I recall correctly. So yeah, it deals actually 5 to 10 stagger damage to all enemies, all allies recover 5 to 10 stagger resistance. It is very good at the start of the game, when 10 stagger resistance is like a third of your full stagger resistance, but after that, really 5 to 10 stagger means nothing. And it is a one-time usage, so you can get some better pages from Netzach's flaw. I wouldn't put it too low though, because you can get a lot of usage from it, as it is the page that is dropped by the first abnormality of Netzach's flaw, which means that you can use it pretty early. In fact, I'd put it somewhere around Malice, probably under that. They have a very similar structure, but Echoes from the Beyond is actually much better because it gives stagger damage instead of physical damage, and it is a tier 1 instead of tier 3. Now back to this abnormality that I really like a lot for its abnormality pages. Now we have Eternal Rest. It is a tier 3 page from a 4th abnormality, which means that you can use it before you realize the flaw. Which means you can use a tier 3 page before you can realize the flaw. Deal to 7 additional damage against the enemy with the lowest current HP. Boss killer, I guess. And like overall a nice page. So it will go right over, no, let's put it right under Lament, because it has a very similar ability, but it works on the enemy with the lowest current HP instead of... that makes it better, but it is a tier 3. I don't know where to put higher here. Let's put Eternal Rest. Why not? Now we have another abnormality of Melchior's Flaw once again. Yep. It is a abnormality page, Barrier of Thorns. Upon taking a hit, inflict 2 to 8 damage and 1 to 3 bind to the attacker. If 3 bind was inflicted as once, recover HP equal to the amount of damage dealt with this effect. It is actually just literally something like a stone potion of Terraria and really any ability in any game that deals damage when you take damage. But this time it actually inflicts bind to the attacker and heals you if you get lucky. So it basically heals you at a 33% chance, and it deals 2 to 8 damage and can heal 2 to 8 HP. This is probably the best tier 3 page on Nexus floor because it is kind of the most consistent one. It just deals damage, inflicts bind, and sometimes heals you. And while the healing isn't consistent, everything else is. Would put it in object dot. Nope, won't. I retract that vote and now put it in limited. Chained Ras. That's the name, right? I hope I'm correct. Wikipedia, please tell me I am. Yep, it is Chained Ras. A tier 2 page, blend dice gain 1 to 3 power, speed is fixed at 1. So while it seems like an awful page and like 1 speed, really, it's like infinite bind, like why would you go for that for just 1 to 3 power and blend dice? Well, I'll tell you what. If you go for Muse prowess plus the strongest, I think, on Gibura. Basically the Gibura's ability that gives you the ability to get infinite speed on 1 die. You can get all of your dice at infinite speed and they all will have plus 5 power because of that. And when you use a Soul Lament from a plus 6 to 9 strengths, basically, you're guaranteed to stagger somebody. And that means with that setup it is object dodge, without that setup it is like fucking awful. But the setup isn't that hard to pull off once you actually realize it exists, so I would put it somewhere in hi-hat cover. Probably somewhere on the left probably. Back to Netzach's floor, and now we have... what do we have here? A mystery. We have the melody page, Autumn's Passing. Upon a successful pierce attack, inflict 1 aroma. Aroma at the start of the scene takes stagger damage equal to the amount of aroma and half the stack. I mean, it's burn, but stagger damage instead of physical damage. And half the stack instead of solid stack. So it's just worse burn overall. And it's also a tier 2 and you might want to use other tier 2s on Netzach's floor. So yeah, fuck that page, somewhere in between with loyalty, because loyalty is also just outclassed. X is actually a pretty nice page, because slash dice gain 1 to 3 power, take 2 to 5 stagger damage when a slash attack does not hit. It was an awful page that I would have given burned easily before the update to Hot's floor. But now, it is actually a very strong page, because it is once again that page that gives you 1 to 3 power, but the only stagger damage you take from it is only when you don't connect the slash attack. And with 1 to 3 power, it is much easier to connect the attack than without it. So I would say it is pretty nice, and with Mind Hollow, even if you lose some of the clashes, you probably wouldn't lose that many clashes, so you will recover much more stagger resistance with Mind Hollow. I would put it somewhere in the limited tier. I guess just below the stagger damage dealers. And now actually back to these simple pages like Ashes. Upon taking a hit, inflict 1 to 3 burn to the attacker and gain a buff at a 40% chance next scene. Offensive die, inflict 1 burn on hit. I mean, burn stacking, yeah. It's great, it has no downsides. It is basically a very passive page that just gives you buffs. And with Shower, it also gives you the ability to rule the vault. So yeah, that's limited. Really low limited because it isn't incredible, as you know, it is from the first Abnormality, but it also isn't bad at all. Now back to Hot's floor, the updated floor, with another page of the Spider Bot. And to be exact, it is called Alertness. So Alertness actually got a huge nerf from that update, because its speed buff went from alertness to Vulnerable Parasol, and now enemies lose 1 power in a clash against the selected librarian. Upon winning the clash, inflict 1 bite on fragile at 50% chance. Yeah, and this chapter. It isn't that strong, but it has no downsides, and it stacks debuffs. And when using this with like GUI waste, it's just insane. So I guess limited somewhere with friend. And that's it for Saya. Now we have only these pages to rank in the videos going after this one. So this is the finalized product of our work. As you can see, really not many pages are just bad. Most of them are mediocre, and some shine the brightest, and as you can see, there is the one abnormality that consistently gives you just great pages. And yeah, with that I think we can safely say that it is the end of this video, and if you liked it, please subscribe, because I don't know why you would subscribe, but it would make me happy, so please do. And yeah, that was Ruina, and we'll see you around. Goodbye.